the CW launches Crisis on EarthX, the third installment in their annual DC crossover events, tonight, and while it has been condensed from 4 nights last year down to 2 this year, the scope and scale of it are bigger than ever. The way it was shot, and the way the story is told, might be the closest TV has ever seen to a true comic book event miniseries. The production has been hyped as a 3-hour movie, which based on the first quarter, the only part yet provided to the press seems to be the case. Technically an episode of Supergirl, the episode opens with custom Crisis on EarthX title cards and revolves almost entirely around the wedding of Barry Allen and Iris West from The Flash. That differentiates the story from Invasion, last year's crossover, in which 3 of the 4 series simply titled their episodes Invasion and tied into the larger story. While there were through lines that carried across all of the shows, each individual episode centered around the core characters of the show with its name on the series title. Arrow, in particular, dealt with this because Invasion was the show's 100th episode and they had the unenviable task of celebrating the series' history and teasing its future, all while telling a story about how their grounded, bow and arrow-wielding vigilante had been kidnapped by aliens. The 3-hour movie is more in line with what fans hoped for this year. While Invasion drew great ratings and reviews, fans nitpicked the way the episodes and character interacted, as well as the tangential involvement of both the Arrow and Supergirl episodes. Making a 3-hour, effect-heavy superhero movie is not something that is typically done in a week, however, or even in 4 weeks, as the crossover this time around had to be shot in a completely different way. The process had a cost. Arrow star Stephen Amell told reporters that the process had so completely thrown the show's production schedules that he cannot imagine the crossover being done the same way next time around. I think that in order for us to continue down this path, we, as productions, and the CW, as the network, and Warner Brothers, as the studio, are going to have to fundamentally, reconceive how we execute these, because this sort of broke the schedule mold, said Amell during a recent visit to the set of Arrow. I mean, it's just simply didn't fit. There are logistical elements at play, which both give Crisis on EarthX the opportunity to be bigger and better than last year's Invasion and also make it more difficult to manage. The biggest of these, alluded to by Amell in that same interview, is actor availability. In last year's crossover, not many actors had to appear in every episode, and even those who did generally had fairly minor roles in some of them. At the time, it seemed as if Supergirl star Melissa Benoist was the one whose schedule had been most thrown by the whole thing, in part because Supergirl was a major player in the story and in part because her role is one of the most effects-driven. This time around, it seems as though every actor is in more or less every episode, creating a scenario where Crisis on EarthX seemingly took over nearly 4 weeks of shooting on the regularly scheduled shows. It feels, then, more like an event miniseries. Think the final night or Identity Crisis than a crossover event where most of the main story happens in the individual comics, with the main title serving primarily as connective tissue. That, in hindsight, is what they say successfully replicated with Invasion. Oh, and Amell agrees. It really is. For the first time, it's an event, Amell said. It's not a crossover anymore. Call it the crossover if you want. But it's kind of like calling the Super Bowl just a football game. Yeah, sure, they play football, but there's so much other stuff that goes on with it. It's an event. Crisis on EarthX begins tonight at 8 p.m. ETPT on the CW, and runs for 2 hours each, tonight and tomorrow.